Hi, I'm Jazz Tankay, Artisans Editor at Variety. It is my honor to welcome you today to this special presentation on behalf of the Telluride and Mill Valley Film Festivals. Welcome to the world premiere of All In, the Fight for Democracy. We are living in such unprecedented times as we navigate our way through a global pandemic, but it's also an important election year. All In, the Fight for Democracy is an important documentary that provides a historical insight into voter suppression and how laws and barriers to citizens' basic voting rights exist. So I guess without further ado, let me introduce the film makers and directors, Liz Garbus and Lisa Cortés. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining us today. And what crazy times we live in, but it is the world premiere of All in the Fight for Democracy. I guess, why was this important? Why was this story so important for you to tell? Liz, if you want to start.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having us. And from behalf of Lisa and myself, we so wish we were there so badly. And we're just so thrilled to be here, at least a little bit in presence, if not in body. But the film was so important to make because we have a tendency to look at our historical moment as uniquely challenged, right? Or things that are happening, poll closures or ID laws, as kind of discrete laws and actions. But what this film does is it puts what's happening today in our electoral process in the context of its history. And you realize once you've seen it, that it's all part of a larger plan. I like to say this is my first monster movie or horror movie, in that there's been this monster of voter suppression with us as a country from the very beginning. In the beginning, it was 6% of Americans who were eligible to vote. This, despite all the language of breaking free from kings and monarchs, etc. And then we see this monster somewhat vanquished, pushed back, maybe under the water, and then it rears its ugly head once again, and yet again and again throughout our history. So we wanted to put this moment in that context and kind of give you the knowledge and the righteous understanding of how important this right is, the lives that have been put on the line for it. So when you go to the polls this November, whoever you vote for, you understand what's come before and what's at stake.
Yeah. And how did you and Lisa collaborate? Because there's so much to tell, especially when you're going all the way back into history and right up to the present. So do you want to talk about your collaborative process on this, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, this film was made so quickly when you think of the amount of time that usually goes into creating a documentary. And the only way that we could do that, Liz and I, was to develop a hive mind and at the same time divide and conquer. There was a tremendous amount of calls, emails. Of course, we worked physically together pre-pandemic, and then once we moved to a virtual setting, we just were in FaceTiming, Zooming, talking, emailing, texting, whatever to move us and our team forward in an incredibly swift and timely fashion.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating, and the audience will see this in the movie, is just how, voter suppression is so much a part of history as much as it is of the present day. And you draw this great line through that. In terms of documentary filmmaking, like, how much did that narrative change as you were putting it together?
Well, it's different than a verite documentary when you're sort of out there exploring, watching, waiting to see what happens. Of course, this history, it was a learning process for us. I mean, while I think we both came in knowing a lot, we certainly did not know everything at all. And then also, as folks will see who are here tonight to see this film, we take a deep dive into what happened in Georgia in 2018 in Stacey Abrams' race for governor. And we look at that individual discrete story as emblematic as the larger one. It's the canary in the coal mine. It's saying this playbook was established here in Georgia. It's being used all over the nation. Let's understand what happened here so we have a better understanding of the state of voting rights in America today.
And we also brought the film up to this contemporary moment. So it is reflecting the conversations that we're having right now in the wake of the loss of George Floyd and other things that are happening in our country.
And the pandemic, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, the timing obviously was important in getting the film out, you know, in September, but for a story that is constantly changing, you know, with, you know, we've got this stuff going on with the United States Postal Service, you know, the census, all of that is constantly, you know, in the news and changing by the hour. How do you know as filmmakers when to lock picture?
Well, we had a deadline, but, you know, I think more than that, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, it's part of the same playbook. We just see it, you know, popping up its ugly head with a different mask on. So what's happening with ballot boxes, what's happening with the U.S. Postal Service, it relates to these claims of fraud that, you know, that we examine in the course of the film. So while, yes, the news changes day to day, the larger context has been set in this moment. And the film is kind of, you know, up to date because we do examine the crisis of confidence in the electoral system that's been inspired by the current administration since his win in 2016.
Yeah.
And in keeping with, you know, the monster analogy, yes, you know, this is a hydra. You cut one head off and it might have been the felony laws in Florida in the 1800s, and then the hydra appears with two heads, you know, with the fate of our returning citizens in Florida in 2020. So it's always locking and unlocking, but, you know, the tactics and the conversation does not vary.
Yeah. And, you know, you talk about Stacey Abrams and her story, which is part of the bigger story. You know, her parents are in the documentary talking about their fight for the right to vote. You worked with Stacey. What was that like, working with somebody who's so, you know, who's always been fighting for like voting rights and just having her involvement in this?
Well, Stacey is our North Star, you know, in terms of as not only a subject, but also as a producer on the project, who introduced us to so many of the incredible people that we had access to. And she is a North Star for this conversation in her life and in her work.
I think Lisa and I just felt like we were you know, it was history in the making. You know, it's like, I guess, you know, folks who were documenting heroes of the civil rights movement. You know, I feel like we are with a change maker and a trailblazer and a leader, and we feel lucky to have been along the ride with her over this past year and a half.
Yeah. Well, we have a treat tonight for our audience. Before the film starts, we actually have Stacey Abrams here, the North Star. Hi, Stacey.
Hello, Jazz. Hello, Liz and Lisa.
Thank you so much for joining us. I guess, you know, let's just go for this. There's a moment early in the documentary where you talk about communities and, you know, who are convinced that, you know, the process isn't for them. How do we change this mindset, right, and get people to vote? Like, where does that begin?
It begins by acknowledging the reality of their engagement. Part of what has been such a challenge in the conversation and the defeat of voter suppression is the pretense that it doesn't exist, or this complicity that it's always going to be here. And part of the goal of All In is to say, yes, there really are monsters, but now we're going to tell you how to slay them. And what I think Liz and Lisa did so exceptionally well is not only tell the arc of the story in terms of history, but give dimensions to it. So often people dismiss it as it being someone else's problem. And what's so extraordinary about how they tell the story, we see faces that look like our own and faces that look nothing like us. And if you're watching, you suddenly realize you're part of the story too, and you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And All In is calling all of us to be part of the solution for our democracy.
Yeah. And as we speak, I think we'll be 66 days away from the election. And the very core pillar of our society, the United States Postal Service, which allows us to communicate, is being dismantled. What can people do to ensure that their vote is counted and they vote safely, because we are in the midst of a pandemic?
First, don't panic. They're not dismantling the post office. They're trying to slow it down, but this has been around since the beginning of our country. It's going to survive even this attack. What we need is information. It's part of the reason for this documentary. We can fight back best when we have information. And when it comes to voting, vote by mail if you can. And in 41 states you can, without any excuses. You can in every state, but 41 without excuses. And then if you make a plan, vote. If you can't vote by mail, vote early. If you can't vote early, vote on election day. Allinforvoting.com gives you all the resources you need. And the most important things are, do not panic, make a plan, we can win.
Did you want to add anything to that, Liz or Lisa?
I think Stacey said it. And on our website also, if you want to do more than vote, there are ways to volunteer. You can volunteer to be a poll worker, a squad leader, phone bank. I mean, there's all kinds of resources on that website, because I know a lot of people are feeling that sense of panic, and getting busy is a good way to combat that feeling.
And after you watch the film tonight, if you are so moved, you can host a viewing party when the film becomes available on Amazon Prime on September 18th.
Perfect. And talk about the All In for Voting, how that's educating, and, how advocacy groups are seeking to educate and help first-time voters get registered. Do you want to talk briefly about the hashtag All In for Voting and how people can use that and raise awareness and drive people to the polling station?
Sure. All In for Voting is our hashtag and rally cry. And really, it dovetails back to our social impact campaign, allinforvoting.com, where everyone has just talked about the tools that we have there to engage, to register, to mobilize, and to find a way for all citizens to participate in the process on whatever level that one has the capacity to do.
Yeah. Is there anything, this is a group question, but is there anything you learned during the making of this film that gives you hope that our democracy can overcome the assaults that seem to continue on our voting rights as citizens?
So much. I mean, there have been so many trials, lives lost, and with the courage and strength. I mean, we just lost John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, these heroes who put their lives on the line. And, we've seen moments of real growth of the franchise. And we're in a moment of yes, some some crisis in terms of the democracy and with gerrymandering and everything else. But we, as Stacey said, looking at it in the historical context, we'll get through this. We get to work, get everyone to vote, give them a ride, call 5 people. We can get through this. And information is so important, because so many times people go to the wrong poll place, or they have to leave the line not knowing what to do. All that information is available to you, and information is the best strategy for us to get through this time.
Yeah.
I would only add, our democracy is an act of will. There is no such thing as democracy without people who are willing to participate, challenge, and engage. And what we have to learn, voter suppression is an attempt to steal our democracy, to steal those actions from us. And the best antidote is to act, to go and vote, to not vote alone, but to remember that it's power. Fundamentally, this is a test of power. And if we didn't have this power, they wouldn't work so hard to steal it from us. And so the hope I have is that I've never met anyone who willingly gives up their power. And the whole point of this is to remind them that the power of voting, the power of democracy belongs to each of us. And if we're all in, they can't take it from us.
I love that. That is so perfect. And it just leads me into this next segment, which is the presentation of the Mill Valley Film Festival Spotlight Award to Liz and Lisa. This is, it celebrates exceptional work by a film artist and their most current work. So it's my honor to present the 2020 Mill Valley Film Festival Award for your exceptional work on All In, the Fight for Democracy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here, Liz. Here, I'm passing it to you.
Got it. Got it. I had to, Lisa will mail it to me and we'll mail it back and forth. And yeah.
Well,
thank you so much.
This is a great honor. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're so honored by this, and we really hope everyone enjoys the film and tells their friends about it. Again, we just wish we could be there.
And if I can just add, the story could not have been told by two more exceptional filmmakers. And it was an honor to be a part of this project and to watch that vision take form and shape and change the world. So thank you.
Well,
thank you, North Star.
I know, thank you all. But one last question, the audience is about to settle in and watch the film. What do you want them to take away from All In the Fight for Democracy as they leave in their cars and drive away tonight?
I would love for anyone who sees this film to first of all see themselves and their story in it. And as Stacey said earlier, to then go and make a plan and do not leave until your vote has been counted.
Right, and as Stacey also said, that to know that you have this power and it is for you, don't let anyone take it, and to have that righteous belief that you will exercise that power and tell everybody you know to do so as well.
And don't vote alone, whether you do it virtually, have mail-in ballot parties, you drive in caravans from a drive-in to your polling places. Don't vote alone. We overwhelm the system with our presence, and we overwhelm the power of their theft with our taking our power back.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Liz Garbus. Thank you, Lisa Cortés. Thank you, Stacey Abrams, for joining us before we present the film. And to the audience, I hope you'll join us at the 43rd Mill Valley Film Festival from October 8th to the 18th, and we'll continue to explore the theme of democracy in films and in conversations. And this special presentation is co-presented by the Telluride and Mill Valley Film Festivals. Thank you.
Thank you.